Hello, tiny babies. So today I'm going to show you guys the start of your next project. We will be working with a Scribble technique, which I know a lot of you guys will feel very good about. In this Scribble technique, it's important when we're starting, we will be working in pen. When you pick a pen, I would pick one that either has a lot of ink, maybe it's a newer pen, or if you happen to be like me and you buy your pens in packages, maybe you have a couple of the same pen. It will be important that you're using kind of the same pen throughout this artwork, and you will definitely be using a lot of ink, so make sure that you have one that has a reliable amount of ink. So the first part that I want you guys to do is I want y'all to practice by shading a sphere, as well as doing a value chart with 6 scales. So the first thing you're going to do is you can take anything that's round that you would like to trace. I have a candle here. I'm actually going to use the cap from Leonardo da Vinci's Food. In case you were wondering, Leonardo is still doing great. Just living his best life right here. But I'm going to take the lid from Leo's Food. I'm going to use that to ultimately become my sphere. And I'm going to start just by tracing out a circle here. I'm doing this in the pen that I want my whole artwork to be done in. So I've traced out a sphere there. Now when you're scribbling with the pen, a lot of people kind of get into the habit of doing this pattern. I do not want you guys to do a pattern. I want you guys to keep in mind that you're trying to keep it random and small. So you can start by kind of just turning the line in on itself, maybe go in one direction, stop and turn it the other direction. Your goal is that it's just going to be kind of a random pattern. If you start to see that it looks too uniform, try going the opposite way, or maybe you take a second and write your name in cursive, kind of hide it in there. But your goal would be something more wild and messy like that than these nice little rows. That is super important. You'll want to keep that in mind as you're doing your project. So the first thing that we're going to do is shade our sphere. I'm going to try to make it have a gradient effect on my sphere. I want it to have kind of a white spot here, and then ultimately I'll add a little shadow down here to the bottom. So I'm going to start just in the middle, kind of creating some of my midtones. I'm just going all different directions. With this line, I'm keeping it pretty small. With the Scribble, you can always add more, but you can't take away because we are working in pen, so it is permanent. But note that you can always add more to it. So again, I'm just going really randomly, kind of looping it back and forth. I'm going all the way up to the edge on my sphere, keeping that spot that I know I wanted to keep this spot kind of light, just as my mental note for my sphere. And I'm turning that line back in on itself to keep it from developing any sort of pattern. I'm going to work in that gradient as I'm going down farther in my sphere. And I note that I want the middle to be a little bit darker than the top area, and I'm going to want the bottom to be the darkest of all. So I'm still working all the way up to that line, kind of twisting that Scribble back in and around itself. And I'm trying to fill up more of this empty white space as I get farther down to the bottom here. So I'm just keeping that pattern going. You can start to see that it's starting to get a little darker here towards the bottom. And I'm just building up those layers. And overall, you should see that it's starting to develop that gradient look. Alright, so you'll see our sphere started to have some value on it. Now the whole thing is just done by adding layers of that Scribble. I'm using the same color pen for this whole thing. And then lastly, I'm going to add my little shadow at the bottom. I'm just doing it kind of in a spherical shape. Spinning that line back and around on itself. And I'm still trying to avoid that pattern. I want it to be kind of chaotic looking. Alright, so we have our little sphere finished. The next thing that I want you to do is add a value scale off to the right. You can use anything that is flat to help kind of give yourself some borders for this value scale. I'm just going to use another pen to help draw in kind of a straightish line. And then my goal would be for you guys to have 6 values in there, ranging from light to dark. So I'm going to kind of block them out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This one I want to be white, and it's going to work all the way over to the darkest, or black. So now in the space closest to the white, I'm going to have just a very light amount of scribble. There's hardly any in there, and I'm just keeping that kind of random pattern. As I work my way farther to the right, I'm going to add more of those scribbles. So you'll see that it kind of starts to build up that color. And I'm working all the way up to those lines. And then in my last square, it should be so scribbled that it is completely black. Now if you work your way all the way to the end here and you see you might need to go back and add some more. Again, I would always recommend that you start off lighter because it's easy to add, but you can't take away once you put that ink down. So I'm going to make my last square completely black. And I'm just keeping with that random design. I'm turning that line in on itself a lot. So now you can see from this little gradient that I've done, it now looks really, really dark here. So we need to kind of taper this out a little bit. So now that I have that really dark square done, I'm going to work my way back a little bit to kind of even up this value scale a little bit more. So I want it to look like a nice little stair step. It should kind of all fade into each other, like a nice little gradient. Alright, do we see how each one kind of gets gradually a little bit darker? And then our very last one is almost completely black. Alrighty, so we have our value scale, our shaded sphere, and we are donezo.